item of business today. Order, please. The final item of business today is the members' business debate on motion number 8944 in the name of Murdo Fraser on Police Scotland traffic wardens. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could please press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And I call on Murdo Fraser to open the debate. 7 minutes, please, Mr Fraser.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking all the members who signed up to my motion and therefore allowed this important debate to take place. When a centralised police force for Scotland was first proposed, there were warnings from many quarters about what the consequences of this might be. Nearly a year into its conception, many of these concerns have been borne out by experience. Taking what was essentially a locally run and locally accountable service and directing it from the centre was bound to create problems. So far, we have had the closure of vital services, including public counters and police rooms, police control rooms, and now local authorities are faced with the removal of Police Scotland traffic wardens. For the minority of local authorities with decriminalised parking systems already in place, this move might be non-controversial. But for the majority of councils, that's 18 out of 34, who do not have decriminalised parking enforcement, it has proved controversial. Now, let me just illustrate the problem, if I can, within my own parliamentary region, because I believe the situation faced currently by Stirling Council is demonstrative of the wider Scottish picture. In December, Police Scotland informed Stirling Council that they were withdrawing traffic wardens on the 4th of February. After a short review period, this was eventually extended to the 28th of February, the end of this week. The suddenness of this decision has taken many councils by surprise, and it must be remembered that all this has happened without any form of open consultation. Stirling is not alone without decriminalised parking, as there are 17 other local authorities in the same boat, including Scottish Borders, Highland Council and Clackmannanshire. Decriminalised parking certainly is a solution, but it could take nearly 2 years to roll out, as the process will require a full consultation using the considerable time and resources of a community engagement officer. Although it is difficult to cost this, the final total could run into thousands of pounds. In Stirling, Police Scotland have offered to supply a temporary warden service at a cost of up to £90,000 per year during the interim period. But all the revenue raised in the form of tickets and fines will be channelled into the purse of central government, negating any chance of that interim service paying for itself. If Stirling Council were to employ its own wardens during the interim period, it would cost them nearly £200,000 per year. My concern is that the withdrawal of this service is all about saving money and not about providing the best possible service. Police Scotland are shifting money off their books onto the budgets of local authorities. At a time of spending restraint, such an approach appears to be grossly irresponsible. Ironically, despite the removal of civilian Police Scotland traffic wardens, police officers will still have to attend incidents of dangerous parking, which could result in their valuable time being used to deal with incidents that previously were dealt with by civilian staff. That is a false economy. In the last 5 years, Police Scotland traffic wardens have dished out over 11,000 parking fines in Stirling. This is a service that has helped make the town centre more navigable and also has increased pedestrian safety. The loss of this service could result in chaos. Now, on the flip side of this debate is the role of private parking firms. Take the example of Edinburgh. Between 2010 and 2012, wardens from the private firm NSL worked 24 hours a day and issued over 388,000 fines. But it later emerged that 1 in 6 of these was handed out wrongly. There is a danger that in some places police wardens will be replaced by target-driven firms with only profit in mind, which has the potential to hit town centres as overzealous wardens turn away shoppers. Balance is therefore crucial when it comes to parking enforcement. Charges must act as a deterrent to those thinking of parking irresponsibly, whilst also allowing traffic to flow more smoothly. But turn too much in the direction of revenue raising and town centres could become empty. Police Scotland traffic wardens have a great record in doing a good job in maintaining this balance, and their loss could provide fatal for many small businesses, particularly in some of our smaller towns across Scotland. But what is really concerning me about this move It's the rushed nature of change and the lack of any effort to engage locally or conduct an open consultation. By removing wardens, Police Scotland have prioritised national considerations over the interests of individual councils. I fully accept that Police Scotland is trying to trim its budget, and I think most councils would agree that's a reasonable step. But what the objective is the way that it has been handled. It is passing the burden on to local authorities without giving them time to properly bring in an alternative approach. By preventing councils from taking part in an open consultation and foisting these changes upon local authorities so quickly, Police Scotland has given the impression, no matter what was said, they were going to railroad these changes through, and as a result they will have to work very hard to regain the trust of local authorities, councillors and affected residents. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I think it is incumbent on the Scottish Government to step in, to tell Police Scotland to think again, and ask them to delay the withdrawal of traffic wardens until those councils which wish to pursue decriminalisation have the time to do so without a loss of service. Otherwise, it is no exaggeration to say that we could face chaos on our streets. Thank you.
Many thanks. We now turn to the open debate. Speeches of 4 minutes, please. Bruce Crawford, to be followed by Ian Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am pleased to have the opportunity to speak in this evening's debate on Police Scotland traffic wardens, particularly as the decision by Police Scotland to withdraw traffic warden services affects my own constituency of Stirling, as was reflected by Murdo Fraser. The issue of the review and the withdrawal has been subject of some discussion at Stirling Council and in the local press in Stirling. And I hope that Murdo will forgive me for not signing his motion, but I don't think it truly reflects the whole picture as far as the Stirling situation is concerned. Nevertheless, he deserves to be sincerely congratulated for obtaining members' time to have this matter aired. It is clear that the Labour and Tory councillors who together form the administration at Stirling Council have been extremely critical of Police Scotland in committee meetings and in statements to local press. And I think it is fair to say that Police Scotland have not covered themselves in glory in this process. However, I am sure that both they and Stirling Council could learn something from the process that would help improve how they deal with each other and how they deal also with other interested stakeholders in these areas in future. And it is certainly true that the Scottish Government promoted a single police force for Scotland, which ensures that efficiencies can be made and the funding police receive is maximised to achieve the objective, which I think we all share, of keeping our communities safe. And of course, as we know, that has helped retain 1,000 extra police officers and helped the Scottish Government deliver, together with the police, crime down to a 39-year low. However, it is perhaps inevitable that some services would have standardisation of services in the way we provide services throughout the country. And practice across Scotland has varied as far as the wardens is concerned, as Murdo Fraser quite rightly outlines. And with the advent of the police force, a single police force, inevitable that issue would require resolution and see the introduction of more common practice. I have no doubts that the way it is unfolded in Stirling could have been handled better by both Police Scotland and Stirling Council. I want to come to that. But I want to first of all make it clear that Police Scotland have made it clear they will continue to enforce the law in terms of addressing parking considered to be dangerous, obstructive or relating to blue badge disabled parking. Now, despite the protests by Stirling councillors about timescales, Police Scotland did actually write to all councillors in June of 2013, informing that the review of the traffic warden provision was underway, and I have a copy of that letter here. Therefore, from June 2013, there was nothing to stop Stirling Council from taking a much more pragmatic and proactive approach to how this matter should be taken forward. The Council's Public Service Safety Committee could have reacted to this letter if they had been so minded to do so. Instead, no action was taken, and therefore, until they received a further letter issued, as Murdo quite rightly says, by Police Scotland on the 1st of October. Much of the criticism levelled at Police Scotland from Stirling Council's administration is based on complaints that they had sufficient time to implement the changes that would have the duties undertaken by Stirling Council. And while I can say that Police Scotland could have dealt with the matter more effectively, it is also clear the Council could have taken action earlier themselves. It is somewhat a surprise, given that there was a clear heads-up regarding potential change, was provided by Police Scotland in June 2013 that no preparatory work was begun by the Council to take on traffic warden responsibility in Stirling councils. There are good reasons why they should, why a local authority enforcement is a better choice, and why this, in fact, is the right way to go. For instance, enforcement levels when local authorities are responsible are shown to be historically higher. I am therefore surprised that the Council were not faster out of their blocks to try to bring traffic warden services under their control, but immediately reacting in a more positive way to the letter from Police Scotland in June. In conclusion, under the current arrangements with parking fines considered criminal offences, fines go to the Treasury. Under local government enforcement, the local authorities themselves accrue the money generated in fines. Therefore, any revenues raised with the provision of local services, rather than swelling the coffers of the Treasury, tend to stay locally, and that would be a good thing. I've probably stretched my credibility in pushing this any further, Presiding Officer. There's a lot to be learned by both sides on this. I know that both sides are now talking a lot more constructively, and I hope there's a sensible outcome at the end.
Many thanks. I call Ian Gray to be followed by Alison McInnes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And there is a certain irony in rising to defend traffic wardens, so often the butt of jokes or worse. But like so many things in life, perhaps we don't appreciate traffic wardens until we've lost them. And indeed, the caricature of traffic wardens, I think, largely lies in city parking problems. But Scotland, of course, is a nation of towns and villages, and my constituency is a good example of that. And that, I think, is where the greatest problems with this decision lie. In my constituency, 5 towns, Haddington, Tranent, Prestonpans, North Berwick and Dunbar, all already have significant parking problems. All are centres for a rural hinterland and all have very limited bus services, and those they have mostly link those towns to the city rather than the surrounding area. So there is very little alternative for people who want to come into the towns except to bring their cars. North Berwick in particular has already very bad parking problems, and indeed only last week the Community Council in Haddington were talking about traffic chaos, and that while we do have traffic wardens. That's partly because we now have in East Lothian very few traffic wardens. I think 2 police traffic wardens now, but at least there are some, and parkers know that there is the possibility that if they park illegally, they will in fact be ticketed. Some would think that we have little to complain about in East Lothian because in all of these towns on-street parking is free, but as I've said, because there are very few alternatives, imposing charges would not, I think, reduce parking in fact, but rather just impose a burden on those who need to come into town for social or indeed business reasons. But in all of these towns, waiting is limited, and that is a system which has worked and worked well for a good number of years. But it depends on people believing that if they stay beyond the limited waiting time, there is a possibility that they will receive a ticket. And this, of course, as Mr Fraser indicated, is not just a question of inconvenience to motorists. There are safety issues as well, but also local businesses depend on their customers being able to find a place to park. And it's certainly the case, for example, in the summer in North Berwick, where local businesses complain already that on occasion visitors come to North Berwick, try to find a parking place, fail and leave and go somewhere else. And this is something which would surely only get worse. These are town centres already vulnerable and fragile, struggling with all the issues that we know, competition from supermarkets, for example, changing lifestyles, commuter lifestyles, which mean people don't stay in the towns in which they live, except at night. And they have not been supported, but rather undermined by a number of arbitrary decisions from the Scottish Government. For example, in Haddington, as an example, the closure of the local court, and then the consequent closure of the Fiscal's office as well in the centre of town. And now that town will see the wardens go and the potential, as Mr Fraser outlined, for traffic chaos. And while this has gone on, I'm afraid that Scottish ministers have simply looked the other way washed their hands and said these are decisions for the bodies concerned and there is nothing we can do. For the Council, the options are, none of them are particularly palatable. As Mr Fraser outlined, spending a great deal of money employing their own traffic wardens, or perhaps opening their citizens up to the privatised traffic wardens driven by incentives, something which I thought Mr Fraser might have been more in favour of, but eloquently explained why that would be a bad idea. The truth is, Presiding Officer, this is a classic example in the public sector of cutting your nose off to spite your face, or robbing Peter to pay Paul. The police, looking to save money, are removing costs and simply pushing them onto a local authority. And one of the ironies about this is that they are doing this in order to maintain their numbers of police officers, some of whom are also funded by the local authority. That's not fair, it's not helpful, it's not effective, and Police Scotland should think again, and ministers should ask them to do exactly that.
Thank you. Alison McInnes, to be followed by Margaret Mitchell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I congratulate Murdo Fraser on securing this important debate. From the Justice Secretary and Police Scotland's perspective, the cessation of the Traffic Warden service earlier this month establishes a uniform approach to parking enforcement across the country. But what this one-size-fits-all policy has actually achieved is inconsistency of service provision, and it invites anarchic parking in towns and cities throughout Scotland. This reform will mean that in the majority of the country, for the foreseeable future at least, high street businesses could suffer as customers are unable to find parking places. The vibrancy of our town centres will be diminished if people believe it is easier to visit out-of-town shopping facilities. And of course, unregulated parking also poses obstacles and significant dangers to elderly people, those with disabilities and young families. The misuse of dedicated spaces, parking on pavements and overdropped curbs can make streets inaccessible to large sections of our society. And forcing pedestrians onto the road and in close proximity to moving traffic jeopardises their safety and risks casualties. And yet such scenarios seem no longer to be of interest to the police, leading organisations such as Living Streets and the Guide Dogs in Scotland to refer to the potential for parking pandemonium. It strikes me that the swift timetable for the implementation of this reform simply does not cohere with the practical needs of our communities and the length of time it takes to legislate. From the borders to the Northern Isles, councils are not ready or able to step in to fill the parking enforcement void left by the police. Transport Scotland says it takes 18 months to complete the decriminalisation process, from the local authority feasibility study to when the SSI comes into force. Taking into account the initial decision-making process, the hiring and training, it could be 30 months before local authorities are in a position to take on responsibility for parking enforcement. So reports suggest that this has already led to limited backtracking in some areas. But more importantly, local authorities and COSLA have highlighted that the decriminalisation of parking enforcement is only viable and affordable in those areas where there is a significant amount of on-street charged parking. Otherwise, the income from penalties will not cover the management and enforcement costs, let alone pay for the associated transport improvements. In my region, Aberdeenshire has lost 6 traffic wardens, and yet I understand the Council, for those reasons, doesn't have any plans to pursue decriminalisation or introduce wardens in the foreseeable future. So the reform risks establishing a permanent urban-rural divide in enforcement. Indeed, around half the local authorities in Scotland face Hobson's choice: decriminalise parking enforcement or relinquish the service, not just temporarily, but permanently. Withdrawing from extracurricular activities is one thing, but failure to enforce the law to fulfil the full policing curriculum in order to suit their own strategic priorities is quite another. Indeed, the manner in which reforms are being conducted leaves a great deal to be desired. Traffic wardens, police control rooms, service centres, public counter closures, a unilateralist approach to decision-making evident in each case. Once integral to the process, we now have token public consultations and only a nod in the direction of community planning partners. The withdrawal of services such as this in favour of a narrow, enforcement-based national policing model demonstrates a failure to understand the needs of local communities and circumstances. It demonstrates that Police Scotland's national priorities take precedence, and it shows a worrying willingness to shirk responsibilities.
Thank you. And I call Margaret Mitchell to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yet again, this Parliament finds itself debating another set of cuts made by Police Scotland. On top of the loss of civilian staff, the closure of station counters and emergency control rooms, the issue of traffic wardens is now the latest causing concern. I therefore congratulate my colleague Murdo Fraser for bringing this important debate to the Parliament this evening. Given that its budget is being cut, it was only a matter of time before Police Scotland identified its withdrawal from parking duties as an area to target where savings can be made. This was virtually a foregone conclusion, especially as a minority of local authorities have already decriminalised parking enforcement. However, the way in which this change has been implemented and managed has been less than satisfactory, and that's a point made by a number of members already this evening. This is for the following reasons. There's a real concern local authorities have not been given sufficient time to put into place contingency plans. After only a short review period, Police Scotland notified councils in December of its withdrawal of its traffic warden service from this month. There has also been a lack of open consultation, something which councils in Coslow have complained about in writing to the Justice Committee. I don't think I'm going to be able to, if you don't mind, because I'm very short on time. It's going to take the full 4 minutes, unless there's leeway. Is there?
Well, I could give you a minute leeway.
Yeah.
Bruce Crawford.
I just wondered if Margaret Mitchell was listening to what I said as far as the Stirling situation was concerned, because it was actually in June 2013 that Stirling councillors were informed about this potential way forward.
Margaret Mitchell.
Yeah, June to December to make these kind of contingency plans is quite an ask, especially with the kind of budgets that local government are looking at presently. Worse still, the move will result in uncertainty over parking enforcement, particularly as it takes councils around 2 years to apply for decriminalised parking enforcement status. Until then, the only service that will be provided will be police officers intervening if parking is dangerous or significantly obstructive. It seems, therefore, that the withdrawal of this service is primarily about saving money. Significantly, it also reveals how Police Scotland prioritise national considerations over the interests of individual councils. In reality, again, as Murdo Fraser stated, this move represents a false economy. Police will still have responsibility for some traffic enforcement, meaning these higher-paid police officers will be required to deal with more parking issues previously dealt with by civilian traffic wardens on lower wages. Furthermore, Falkirk Council, within my own Central Scotland region, responded to a COSLA survey to say that the withdrawal of this service will lead to congestion in town centres due to a lack of enforcement of waiting restrictions and possible road safety issues. In North Lanarkshire, the council has been forced to employ wardens at a cost of £180,000 and set-up costs of £120,000, which will be met from fine income, but also from money taken from roads budgets. With more than 100,000 fines issued in the former Central Police Force area each year, this is obviously a considerable operation which will now need to be paid for by local authorities. In addition to this, councillors who have expressed concern that this move could result in chaos in our town centres have simply been ignored. The fact of the matter is, Presiding Officer, that enforcement still needs to be carried out, and councils already facing financial pressures and no additional resources to do so are left with this problem. In light of these concerns, this is a decision which requires to be reviewed, and I very much look forward to the Minister's comments at the close of the debate.
Thank you. I call Liam MacArthur to be followed by Graham Pearson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by offering my congratulations to Murdo Fraser on bringing this evening's debate. Can I also acknowledge his track record on this? He raised a question at General Question Time recently, which allowed the Justice Secretary to provide a rather illuminating response about the situation in Fife, when in fact the question was about the circumstances in Stirling. I was being told by the Justice Secretary that there was only one traffic warden in Orkney, which came as news to me. as I'm sure I'd seen one both in Kirkwall and in Stromness. But neither of those responses, I have to say, inspired a great deal of confidence. As Murdo Fraser indicated, the option here being posited to many local authorities is to go down the route of decriminalisation. But as Alison McInnes and I think Ian Gray alluded, this is not really a viable option in many rural communities like the ones I represent. I think the prospect of being able to recoup anything like the costs of running the service through fines, I think is wholly impractical, and indeed runs counter to many of the initiatives that I think Orkney Islands Council and the Community Planning Partnership there are embarked upon in terms of rejuvenating town centres, and I think it was a point that Ian Gray was making as well. It also runs counter to many of the initiatives that Living Streets point to in terms of making town centres more accessible and indeed less dangerous places. I think we've also heard this evening the view that one size does not fit all. I'm very conscious that in Orkney there are unique local circumstances at play, that the traffic wardens in Kirkwall and in Stromness provide a very wide range of responsibilities that go far beyond parking enforcement. These are responsibilities that council employees, even if the budget were to be freed up to allow it to happen, would be unable, would not have the authority to perform, whether in terms of directing traffic at ferry entry points, directing traffic at agricultural shows, at funerals, and in relation to road traffic accidents. All of those would simply fall, as I think a number of members have mentioned, to police officers to perform, and in a way that strikes me as more than a false economy. The Justice Secretary, in response to the questions that Murdo Fraser and myself were raising 2-3 weeks back, suggested that these are matters for Police Scotland. However, as Orkney Islands Council have made clear to me, previously Scottish Government funding came directly to the Council. It was then under agreement with the Northern Joint Police Board requisitioned to pay for policing services, including traffic wardens. This funding is now being paid by Scottish Government directly to Police Scotland, and we, Orkney Islands Council, consider this payment to include services as previously provided. So I think there is a compelling case for ministers to re-engage with Police Scotland, ask them to think again, particularly in those areas where the route of decriminalisation is simply not going to provide an answer in terms of delivery of these services. So once again, can I thank Murdo Fraser for bringing this evening's debate to the Chamber, and I've certainly been encouraged by the comments of colleagues across the board that this is an issue on which there does need to be a rethink by Police Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. Graham Pearson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank Murdo Fraser for giving the opportunity for this debate this evening, and congratulate him on creating that time. I also congratulate colleagues on raising many of the issues that I would have raised given the opportunity tonight, and you'll be pleased to know I won't labour at this time in the evening. But I think I should pay a particular heed to Bruce Crawford and his wonderful attempt to paper over the cracks in terms of how this matter has been dealt with, which makes it very difficult for people like me who support the concept of a single police force, but yet evidence is offered at the lack of sensitivity and consideration before deciding issues as they affect local communities. It's only some weeks ago that we discussed cycling in this chamber and indicated that we needed to make our highways a safer environment for people to cycle on. And certainly as far as some of the areas that I represent across the south of Scotland, parking is an issue in enabling those who would cycle in our towns and cities to make their way safely in their journeys. As far as Dumfries is concerned, until recently there were 6 traffic wardens. Within a matter of months, those 6 traffic wardens dwindled to 2, and now it would appear that there will be none available to perform duties in the area of Dumfries. Dumfries is, like some of the descriptions given earlier by other members, a very busy market town, which attracts, thankfully, many visitors, mostly whom arrive by car. And the layout of the town centre, being centuries old, is not particularly amenable to traffic passing through the city. It's therefore important that enforcement is managed in a sensitive and timely manner. I think it's unreasonable to expect Police Scotland to be able to provide uniform support for those motorists who will take advantage of the fact that traffic wardens are no longer on patrol across the town. And the expectations that those duties will be picked up by the local authority is in the short term without any answer, as far as I can see. One wonders, in looking at the circumstances, where was the plan that should have been shared with each of the local authorities to enable discussions to be held in good time? There's been 3 years in the planning of where we are today. There could have been many discussions behind the scenes to make some preparations. A lot has been said about consultation. It's quite evident that whatever consultation did take place was not timely and was not productive. It was not the kind of consultation that drew people on board and made them fully aware of the impact of what was planned. And finally, where was the partnership working, which we hear so much about in this chamber, where all the partners gather together and discuss the problems that face them all? A letter in the post indicating a review just shortly after a change in the national arrangements for policing is hardly a red light to say, wake up, something's happening quickly. And that's certainly what didn't happen in these circumstances. And indeed, the handover has been one which has left many local authorities holding the baby and left with a solution that they need to provide with very few facilities in order to make that provision effective. So hopefully the Minister will have heard the complaints made around the chamber in connection with this. From my point of view, I hope it has an impact in the way Police Scotland negotiates its way forward for the future. We know the government has demanded £60 million in savings, and we know that that's probably been the driver for the current action. Let's hope that further plans for the future involve local communities and involve accountability. Thanks, Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. I now invite Rosanna Cunningham to respond to the debate. Minister, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I also congratulate Murdo Fraser for obtaining his members' debate. He will know that I am rarely likely to be troubled by traffic wardens, whether police or otherwise, so I don't know whether or not one ought to state a non-interest, in fact. I think in fairness I ought to say that. Police Scotland's purpose, as everybody knows, is to improve the safety and well-being of the people and communities of Scotland. And can I assure Graham Pearson that I am certain that they are indeed monitoring this debate and will take note of all the comments that are made. Their focus is on keeping people safe, as it would have been always, even before they came together into one police force. And this is at the heart of everything they do. And it contributes to our own national strategic objective of a safer, stronger Scotland. And as you would expect me to say, the Scottish Government, working with Police Scotland and the Police Authority, is committed to protecting and supporting frontline services. Crime is at a 39-year low, supported by our commitment to 1,000 extra officers in our communities compared to 2007. And local policing does remain the bedrock. Local communities and councillors have more access than ever before to engage with police through designated local commanders, one for each of the 14 divisions, and through local policing plans, one for each of the 353 council wards. It is for Police Scotland to decide how best to use the resources available to them, to take the operational decisions that keep the people of Scotland safe, and that would always have been the case, even with the 8 forces prior to Police Scotland coming into being. And it is, of course, for the Scottish Police Authority to hold them to account for the decisions they take. The decision regarding dedicated traffic wardens reflects Police Scotland's purpose, its focus on the effective use of resources and value for money on the service they provide, its powerful commitment to its key aim of keeping people safe. So let's be clear, in all local authority areas, Police Scotland will continue to tackle dangerous and obstructive parking. In non-DPE areas, they will continue to work positively in partnership to take a targeted approach to priority issues, and they will continue to pay particular attention to offences committed in disabled parking bays or abuses of the Blue Badge scheme. So it might be useful to put this issue into perspective, because I don't believe this will, as some have claimed, lead to complete chaos in the streets. Why do I not believe that? It may surprise members, but the average number of tickets issued per year by police and traffic wardens across the 32 local authorities amounts to just 2.5 tickets per day. Now, that's both police and traffic wardens. That's over the entire area of Scotland. Even taking weekends out of the equation, it would only amount to 3.5 per day on average. And by the same token, it is for local authorities to set their priorities and deliver them within the resources available, having first fulfilled statutory obligations. And in this regard, the Scottish Government is providing local government in Scotland with over £10.3 billion in 2013-14. And this issue, like many others, presents an opportunity for local authorities to consider sharing services to realise efficiencies, for example, in sharing back office functions or around the roles and responsibilities of enforcement officers. Now, I spoke of the number of tickets issued across Scotland. In the Courier on 13 February, Murdo Fraser claimed that ending Stirling's Police Scotland Traffic Warden service will bring the town to a standstill, an observation based on an average of fewer than 7 tickets issued per day in Stirling.
Murdo Fraser.
Grateful to the Minister for giving way. Does the Minister not accept there is a deterrent effect to having traffic wardens on the streets? If traffic wardens are removed and people know they're removed, they're far more likely to park inappropriately than is currently the case.
Minister.
I have some comments germane to Murdo Fraser's intervention, which I will come to a little bit later. Bruce Crawford's comments were welcome. It is the case that the Traffic Warden Review began in May last year, so there was a 5-month period between that and the date of the SPA's final decision. And it does seem to me as if that 5-month period appears to have just been swept aside, and I do wonder about the extent of the engagement that local authorities did enter into in that period. I confess, Presiding Officer, that I waited with interest to see which MSPs turned up to this debate, because, of course, many local authorities have been successfully operating successful DPEs for a number of years. Indeed, both Murdo Fraser and myself live in one such area. And while Perth itself, like many cities, has traffic problems, I am not aware of there being any chaos. If that had been the case, I'm sure he would have been quick to refer to it. Is he going to now refer to the traffic chaos in Perth?
Murdo Fraser.
For giving way. I don't dispute that local authorities can go down the decriminalisation route if they wish. The problem is, as I pointed out, that process can take 2 years or more to progress. What's going to happen in the interim?
Minister.
I'm going to make some pertinent points about that, because it is informative that in June 2011, the then Strathclyde Police withdrew the police traffic warden system from the whole of Strathclyde. Of the 12 local authorities in the area, 3 did already have DPE in place. 4 have adopted DPE since. Inverclyde and Argyll and Bute are in the process of applying for DPE, and North Ayrshire, North Lanarkshire and Western Bartonshire have not yet made a decision on applying for DPE. Now, there was no evidence of outcry at the time. No debates, no motions, nothing. Which is remarkable, really, because if all the chaos and confusion predicted by various members in this debate this evening was to be believed, I'm surprised we didn't hear references to that terrible Strathclyde experience. The Scottish Government, I think I just want to now finish. I've got a few more things to say, and I would like to just get on and say them. The Scottish Government is committed to working with local authorities, together with Police Scotland, to look at the impact of this decision and to support the process towards DPE where there is agreement to progress. And this dialogue has already begun. In a number of areas there have been discussions. Police Scotland have put in place local arrangements to continue provision of a traffic warden service in West Lothian and Mid Lothian, and are close to reaching agreement with Stirling, Falkirk and Highland for Inverness for continued provision of traffic warden service for up to 2 years, supported by funding from the local authority. So, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I reject the motion that has been presented. Local authorities have in fact had since 1997 to consider their position regarding parking enforcement. And Murdo Fraser is laughing. But in fact, the Chamber needs to be reminded that the relevant legislation was put through by the last Conservative government, something curiously missing from Murdo Fraser's opening remarks. Police Scotland have demonstrated that for them to continue to provide this service is not value for money for the communities they serve. But of course, neither the Scottish Government nor Police Scotland are just walking away. Engagement has been ongoing since May last year, and we are keen this is continued to ensure that any impact from this action does not have a detrimental effect on the people and businesses of Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes Murdo Fraser's debate on Police Scotland traffic wardens, and I now close this meeting of Parliament.